Mizmor Dovid, Adonai Rovi Lo Echsar, B'nosdesha Yar B'tzeini Al Mei Menuchos Hina Aleini, Nafshi Yishovev Yancheni V'Maglei Tzedek L'man Shemo, Gam Keilech B'Geit Salmaves Lo Yirara Ki Atoi Modi, Shivtecha Mishantecha Hemi Nachamuni, Taroch L'fonai Shulchan Neged Sororoi, Tishan Tov Hashemen Roshi Kosi Rivoya, Ach Tov Chesed Yerdefuni Koy Mechayoi, V'shavti B'Veis Adonai Liorech Yamim. We read in this past Shabbos' Torah reading of the blessings that Bilam inadvertently gave to the Jewish people. And probably the most famous phrase from those blessings is Matovu O'alecha Yaakov. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob. The Medrash asks, what was it that Bilam saw that made him remark on the beauty of the tents? And the Medrash explains that there was a sense of tznius, there was a sense of modesty, that they situated their tents in a manner that the opening of one tent wasn't parallel to the opening of another tent, and that people couldn't see inside of each other's tents. This Medrash is normally understood as a sense of physical modesty. There are certain aspects of the home that are private, and the Jewish people beautifully were diligent about this sense of physical privacy. But there is another idea that some of the commentators discuss when looking at this Medrash, and that revolves around the very basic question: how do we find happiness? How do we find fulfillment in our lives? Truth be told, the vast majority of us find happiness and fulfillment by looking inside of someone else's tent. I have things that I'm insecure about. I have frustrations. I have failures. I don't really want to look myself in the mirror all the time. What I'd much rather do is I'd much rather look in someone else's home, see their problems, see their shortcomings, and then I can think about it a little bit and I realize I'm not that bad. I don't have it that bad off. And that's how I can find fulfillment and happiness. If we're honest with ourselves, the vast majority of us find a sense of fulfillment in our lives through that very approach. I think Dr. Gaisin, Eilihu ben Mנחם Mendel HaKohen, really lived his life not needing to look inside of another family's tent. I think he was the type of person who was able to look at his own life, look at the beautiful family and the beautiful home that he built together with his remarkable wife, and be content and be satisfied and be so very proud of each and every one of his children. And because he was able to find his own sense of happiness without seeing the problems in other people's tents, he was also a person who was genuinely able to be happy for other people with their accomplishments, with their joyous occasions. And you know, I've really felt this way. I've known Dr. Gaisin for a very long time. Our families lived across the street many years. And I always thought of him that way. I always thought of him as just a remarkably kind-hearted, warm, good person. But I have to confess, every now and then you look at a person and you ask yourself, are they really that nice? You know, are they really? There's a lot of people who are very sweet, and then when the door closes, they say what they really think. There's a lot of people like that. And over this last period of Dr. Gaisin's life, as I had the tremendous chus of seeing his beautiful family rally around him, it was obvious to me that everything that I thought, and I can't imagine I'm the only person in the room who thinks that, was even more true than I had imagined. Because the love that was so apparent, of course, from his wonderful wife, Sheila, but from each and every one of his children, their absolute devotion down to the detail of everything that he needed, whether it be physically, whether it be halachically, whether it be what would daddy like, speaks of a remarkable emotional connection that he had with each and every one of them, and a remarkable sense of devotion and loyalty that each and every one of them felt towards him. And I sincerely believe the only way a person can have that behind closed doors is if when the door closes, it's truly, truly a beautiful home. And it's clear that each of his children lived with a remarkable level of admiration for him. You know, I don't mean to be cute when I say this, but in a sense, the Rosenbaum family's tent was more or less across from the Gaisin family's tent on Lamberton Drive. And I'll tell you, it happened to be a few months ago. I was visiting my parents' home, and I was leafing through some old albums. And I happened to find a photo album that happened to be the period of time when we first moved to Silver Spring. And there were these pictures, you know, you have labels on pictures, so there were these pictures about, with the Gaisins, 1985, whatever year exactly it was. There were all these warm pictures. And not thinking about Dr. Gaisin particularly at the time, just thinking about my family and their family, I thought to myself, you know, we had just come here, and this was clearly a family that was very connected, very, very many warm friendships, as is obvious from looking around the room. And here was this family that so embraced us. And you saw it in the pictures. You saw it in their smiles. You saw it in our smiles, that we felt embraced. And when I was reflecting on those pictures just yesterday, I thought to myself, what greater proof of how people from one tent see people from another tent. And that's really how it's supposed to be. If I may just make one more point. I learned one more thing about this beautiful man and his extraordinary tent just over the last few weeks. Soon after Dr. Gaisin received his very serious prognosis, I had the opportunity to visit the Gaisins in their home. And it happened to be that it was just myself and Dr. Gaisin sitting there for the first 3 minutes. And there was a book on the coffee table about emunah, about faith. And I walked in, and you know, you don't know what you're going to have to say and what questions you'll have to answer, or maybe there'll be no questions, who knows. And I walked in, and without any fanfare and without any flamboyance, just straight and simple, the same way Alan Gaisin would smile at you in the street. No flash, just straight. Dr. Gaisin began to speak about how he sees this as an opportunity to strengthen his faith. And he points to this book, and he says, this is what I've been reading about. And I thought it was remarkable. So there's so much that can be said. There's so much that will be said. You have many speakers. I don't want to take too much time personally. But I, on behalf of the community, wanted to reflect on this remarkable character of a person, both in his interpersonal conduct and his conduct with God. And Dr. Gaisin, you should be a Melitz Yosher for your beautiful mishpacha. The beautiful tent which you built should continue to flourish in so many places, in so many special ways. And you from Shemayim and Tzibara L'chaim, your wonderful devoted wife here, should share nachas together from your beautiful family for many years to come. I would just like, on behalf of the community, on behalf of myself, on behalf of the community, sometimes when a person is more quiet, we don't necessarily give all the attention that a person deserves. And surely there were times, whether myself, whether others in the community, didn't give the appropriate regard, respect, admiration that you surely deserved. And for that, I'd like to ask Mechila. Leich b'shalom. Mrs. Sheila Gaisin.
I'm standing here before all of you, and I'm feeling so overwhelmed and so really speechless in my grief. My sense of loss is so great. It's really infinite. My beloved husband, Alan, was such a precious part of my life, and his memory will always be so precious to me. Honestly, I can't imagine living without him because he has been such a total, wonderful life partner. I have infinite gratitude to Hashem for bringing Alan into my life. It was an amazing gift to have you as my life partner, Alan. But I wanted more. I feel you deserve more, but Hashem knows best. We were blessed with 49 years of a beautiful marriage, but it seems like it was just barely a year. I feel like we are still in our honeymoon year. Alan and I met almost 57 years ago in the fall of 1962 when Alan joined my 11th grade class at a community Jewish high school in the Philadelphia area, Akiba Hebrew Academy. It was pretty much love at first sight for me, even though at first we hardly spoke to each other. Dearest Alan, my feelings for you are beyond the dimension of mere words. Everyone who knows you, Alan, appreciates your sensitive, kind, and caring style. You're always eager to help others, share information, and give moral support. You're just about never judgmental and accept people for who they are, where they're at. Although you're a brilliant doctor, you're also tremendously humble and a true Eved Hashem. Dearest Alan, you possess these many outstanding midot, and your soul is the purest soul I've ever known. You never really had to strive to be good. You simply were good. I tried to be a good wife to you, my dearest Alan, but please forgive me for all my inadequacies. You were always prompt, and I really had trouble with promptness. I'm much better now. But you were always willing to wait for me. Goodbye, dearest husband. May you rest in peace as you well deserve. I will love you forever, and I will miss you forever, and I will remember you forever. I am really inconsolable at this infinite loss that we can't be living life together in this world anymore. But in my heart, my soul, you will be my life partner forever. Come to share.
Sister Gail Glicksman.
I deeply regret that the occasion to share wonderful things about my beloved brother is his death. And although some of the themes that I'm going to lift up today weave through what everyone is going to say, I think I have some unique perspective, having had the chance to grow up with him even before he fell in love with his beloved Sheila. I know that each of us here knew him in different ways. And what I'm hoping, a commercial message, I'm hoping that in the days to come, we can hear stories from all of you about your experiences with our beloved. And I'm hoping also, as I understand the family put together an email address, that anybody who wants to send memories, it would be so comforting for us to be able to compile those, to hold on to. So, Alan was many things, an extremely patient teacher, and I think of him and all the things that he taught me. Music. Now, he had a feel for music, and we went to the same music school, although I was 10 and a half years younger. For him, they found the most accomplished teachers. They told my parents he just had such a talent, and they actually thought of becoming a concert violinist at one point. He had a talent and an interest in the arts and photography, and also was sent to special classes for all of that, and I'll mention how that ties into his professional work. He taught values of all kinds, hard work. I've never met anyone who had a commitment to work, to do things for others that he had. I think he internalized that from our parents, but he carried it out. I never met anyone with the discipline that he had. He would suggest something, read something in complementary techniques, better nutrition, and he would actually do that. You know, it's not easy, but he had discipline for everything that he tried. He was modest, so humble. That's part of the reason, since he was so quiet, that I'm hoping that you will share memories of him, because there may be ways that he touched your lives, but we have no way to know. And his love for Yiddishkeit, he expressed it in so many ways. I would hear him practicing chazanut. I would hear him listening to recordings, vinyl in those days, of the emerging songs from Israel, folk music. All kinds of music moved him. And that made a difference. And I'm sure he and Sheila together passed that on to their family. He was especially eager to compile resources for the Seder. What new commentary, what new approach, what new reading can we all share? So family, as you'll hear many times today, was very important to him. Our parents, Mendel and Sophie, Manny, Menachem Mendel, comforter. It runs through Alan. I understand that what attracted my father to my mother, our father to our mother, was that my mother was very devoted to her family. There are some cousins here. Her family went through a lot to get out of Eastern Europe, and our father's family, his father and mother perished in the pogroms. He was only 10 years old. He had a rough experience, but family then meant so much. And that's part of the legacy that gets passed on through Alan. And he was extremely nurturant. So I mentioned he was 10 and a half years older. I gather he wanted a sibling and he felt great joy. He insisted I be named Gila, joy, even though I don't get it. Maybe I don't always feel so joyous, especially at a time like this. But he treated me. I was too young to know when I was an infant and toddler. Everyone's told me how nurturant he was. And then the times I remember when I was a little older, he would let his little sister tag around. He would take me to the library. And on the way, you know, he was 6'1". He had quite a stride. I had to answer questions. So what did you read and what was the theme? And tell me about it. And you didn't pronounce it exactly right. Very strict teacher. Winnie the Pooh, he was asking me about. But he was a student. And that same studiousness carries through everything he did. So this family environment, this love that his beloved Sheila and he fostered, it really carries on. And forgive me to repeat what the rabbi said, but a little aspect of it. When faced with his final illness, his family rallied and created Team Gaisin, and even cousin Avram, Sheila's almost like a brother to Sheila, created a family, each contributing in different ways, whether grandchildren, even a picture from a great-grandchild, were boosting up. We had project management software and WhatsApp and all kinds of ways. We connected in, everyone in a different way. And the team moved mountains to make changes to help our beloved Alan. So, family. Early in his profession, he wanted to blend his love for family, his love for children, with whatever came easily to him in medicine. So he became a pediatric dermatologist. The Children's Hospital Philadelphia was across from where he was training for residency, and I understand they would call him over when they had a case that was very difficult. And then he started his career as a professor in the medical school there at Children's Hospital. And I read an interview some years ago about why he wanted to do that, because he understood that when a person of any age, but especially a child, experiences physical, skin, deformity of some kind, that person can have emotional scars and can be teased and tormented. And he wanted to try to prevent and heal the scars. That was important to him. And the other part of that is when most of us look at something visual, one thing looks like another, but he had such visual acuity, I mentioned the art, that he could perceive patterns that made all the difference in diagnosis and treating. So he was a man of few words. Honestly, the only time I saw him animated was when he was sharing knowledge, when he was able to help someone. Only time. And when I look over to the family photos, the last thought I want to share with you, especially these past weeks, we've been sharing family photos. I did not see a smile on Alan's face when he was growing up. Everyone talks about a smile. If I look historically, when did the smile emerge? When his beloved Sheila and he got together. Those were the pictures where there's a smile. And the pictures where he's especially radiant, the ones that stand out to me, are the ones of his children and his grandchildren. And in just, was it 2 months ago, just weeks ago, that wonderful photo of him with his new first great-grandchild, beaming. Picture of him with his family when he had a birthday, when he had an anniversary. I asked what he wanted. This is the last thought. Most of us want something that we can enjoy, something indulgent, a gift, a trip. He said he only wanted one thing, all of his family to be together in the same place for a Shabbaton, that they should spend Shabbat from beginning to end with singing, with joy, with close relationship. He wanted that to go on. And we saw in Team Gaisin, in his last illness, that collaboration, that bond goes on. And Sheila, my beloved too, I don't have a sister. You and Alan, I know it's a terrific loss, but you leave behind such a legacy.
Son-in-law, Rabbi Chanan Adler, he'll be speaking from outside.
There's an old saying, when you travel on the main road, you're likely to encounter others alongside you. Much of what I will share has already and will be said by others, but truth shines through. It's difficult, speak about my father-in-law, Eliyahu Cohen ben Mendel, in the past tense. To us, his immediate family, the loss is devastating. My father-in-law passed away in the fast of Tmuz, a day which marks, among its tragedies, the cessation of the carbon tamid, daily offering that provided a sense of consistency and stability in the service of the Beis Hamikdash. Like the carbon tamid, my father-in-law was a constant presence in our lives, a steady and reassuring anchor, a role model, and an inspiration to all of us. My father-in-law was an extremely modest person, quiet and unassuming. It is said about the Chofetz Chaim that his gadlus was intertwined with his pashtus. His greatness radiated from his unpretentiousness. Sometimes we are too smart for ourselves, too quick to toot our own horn about our knowledge and our personal accomplishments. My father-in-law was a very knowledgeable person who was blessed with a brilliant intellect. He excelled in medical school. He served capably in his profession for decades, winning accolades from peers and patients alike. He was a repository of medical knowledge, keeping up with the latest developments in the field. He was always open to looking at things with a fresh perspective, even what was outside the conventional box. In truth, he had a wide variety of interests, both in Torah and worldly subjects, and he'd always try to find ways to integrate them. Because of his medical background, he gained proficiency in becoming a Maleh. He trained with respect in Maleh. He studied Hilchos Milah with a noted Talmud Chacham. I once was looking in the study and I found a volume of the Shulchan Aruch of Hilchos Milah with worn pages and markings in the margins. And he performed dozens of halakhic circumcisions, including of several of his children, as well as of many Jewish infants who would otherwise not have had a bris milah. The parents were unwilling to allow the child's bris to be performed by a mother who was also a doctor. He drew a special pleasure from discovering an overlap between his diverse areas of interest. For example, when a new piece of medical knowledge served to corroborate the ancient wisdom of the Torah. I recall once he was sharing with me excitedly a scientific study that measured a quantifiable degree of positive energy resulting from wearing the tefillin shel rosh in the precise position of the head dictated by halacha. He was an avid reader. He would regularly spend time preparing the Torah to share at the Shabbos table and other occasions. But with all of my father-in-law's brilliance, he always carried himself with a natural pashtus, an unassuming quality, a graceful humility with no airs whatsoever. People would seek out his medical expertise at all hours of the day and night. He was extremely gracious with his time and his knowledge, always willing to extend a helping hand. And this quality made him beloved to so many people. When you interacted with my father-in-law, you could see that there was literally no sense of ego. There are people in this world who unfortunately begrudge the good fortune of others. A part of them feels as if the success of others comes at their own expense. In Yiddish, there's an expression, to fargin. To fargin means to be emotionally at ease when others do well, to feel good for others. My father-in-law had that ability to fargin. It came naturally to him. There was not a tinge of jealousy in his being. My father's unpretentiousness, his pashtus, was also evident in his identity as a Jew. He had tremendous respect for rabbis, for rabbanim, irrespective of their backgrounds and across the spectrum. If you look at the Gaisin home, you'll see a range of Idolim pictures. On top of his computer, I saw 3 pictures just this morning, one next to the other, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, of Aaron Kotler, of Salvation. Here at the shul, he revered Rabbi Einemer, Zechron Livracha, recognizing his incredible scholarship and all that it represented. He felt an affinity to the Yeshiva Gdola in Rashi Yeshiva, Rabbi, in his administration, very proud of this affiliation. And this expression of respect extended equally to the younger Rabbanim, Rabbi Rosenbaum, Rabbi Weinberg, and others whose names were always mentioned by him with appropriate regard. My father possessed what is commonly known as emunah pshuta, a visceral belief in Hashem and the fundamentals of our faith. He would speak passionately about such issues as the efficacy of prayer, the immortality of the soul, chiyas hamesim. To him, these were not abstract concepts, but a concrete roadmap for a living life. Ever since childhood, my father felt drawn to the path of Yiddishkeit. Although he lacked a formal yeshiva education, it was apparent that he thoroughly identified with the story of Am Yisrael, the history of our people, going back to the seminal events described in the Torah, Yitzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, until this very day. That was part of his inner core and essence. Having been raised in the shadow of the Holocaust, he felt a keen awareness of its horrors and the heavy toll that it took on our people, both collectively and individually. On several occasions, I saw him visibly moved to tears while sharing stories from that tragic era. At the time of his marriage, he made a concrete commitment, along with my mother-in-law, Tibadul Chaim Tovin, to embrace a Torah lifestyle and to pass on that legacy to his children and future generations. Last year, Miriam and I had the privilege of marrying off our eldest daughter, Shalva, and very recently, we were blessed with our first grandchild. The bris was just a week before Shavuos, and remember how my father came and shed such nachas. None of this would have been possible were it not for his fierce commitment to Yiddishkeit and the choices that he, along with my mother-in-law, made so many years ago. Miriam and I feel fortunate that we have done our part and hope with Hashem's help to continue doing our part to bring his neshama, nachas ruach, and true Yiddish nachas. My father-in-law felt great fulfillment in a Torah lifestyle and being part of a warm, tightly knit Jewish community. He was always willing and open to expand his religious horizons, growing in observance and supplementing his Torah knowledge. Whenever possible, he would attend shiurim given by various rabbis in the community, and he would relish sharing their novel insights. Often when my family would visit, I would be invited to speak at one of the local shuls here, KMS, and Daddy would always make a special effort to attend and to shed nachas. His observance of mitzvahs was genuine and often performed with a great measure of self-sacrifice. In recent years, he was beset with several ailments which made it difficult for him to get to shul and virtually impossible for him to stand Shmoneh Esrei. And yet he persevered. He did his utmost to come to shul regularly and to daven in whatever way that he could. None of these sacrifices was ever accompanied by a sense of bitterness or frustration. He was not a bitter person. It was simply not in his nature. Sadly, he had his share of suffering in life, personal and health challenges, profound family disappointments. Yet he never allowed any of these to morph into self-pity. He always managed to remain upbeat and optimistic, holding out hope for a positive outcome. Even after his recent diagnosis, he remained hopeful and continued to research alternative treatments to supplement the conventional medical protocol. My father-in-law, in his own quiet way, radiated a sense of warmth and love, and this spirit imbued his Yiddishkeit and his whole outlook to life. The subliminal message was that Yiddishkeit, that Judaism is a happy religion, that Torah is beautiful, and this optimistic quality endeared him to the family and beyond. For my children, for so many of the grandchildren, Zaidi was their hero. As mentioned, my father had a great affinity for music, especially Jewish music, a talent that's become apparent in the children. The Gaisin Shabbos table, Yom Tov tables were always filled with a positive spirit, with lots of miros. The experience of the last week in the hospital, as heart-wrenching as it was also a demonstration of the love and warmth that he engendered. It was a celebration of life rather than merely being an expression of sorrow. It was literally a round-the-clock vigil around his bed, his hospital bed, as the songs were mixing with tears and bittersweet memories, along with tefillos from Shabbos Miros, davening of Yamim Noraim and Sholosh Regalim and more. The love, the warmth, the good energy were palpable. There was something extraordinary to behold. A remarkable testament to the beautiful home that my father-in-law, along with my mother-in-law, Brother Chaim Tolkien, have created. And it's a reality to be cherished and treasured forever. It's hard to believe that Daddy is no longer with us. Everything happened so quickly and suddenly, it seems surreal. All of us are to some extent still in an emotional state of shock. We cannot comprehend Hashem's ways. We all feel perhaps subconsciously that Daddy deserved better. We were so looking forward to celebrating his forthcoming birthday and many future birthdays, and to providing him with continued nachas to our respective families. And yet I know that what my father-in-law would have wanted us to do at a time like this is to seek out a silver lining, even in the midst of the pain. There are many such silver linings, one of which is the fact that there was an opportunity for the family to bond in an incredible way and to express a measure of closure these past few days. That sense of love and bonding is something that is beautiful and should be treasured. Every one of us, but especially the Gaisin siblings, is unique and has a responsibility to actualize his and her unique potential in a way which is true to Daddy's legacy. Not only through observing the words of Avelos and saying Kaddish, but by embodying his traits and living by the values that he stood for. That is the ultimate zchus for his neshama. And finally, there's a message here for all of us about the preciousness of life. So much of our time and energy is often spent on things that are ephemeral and transient. And it's only in hindsight that we come to appreciate the gift of life itself. About 26 years ago, in the summer of 1993, before I had even met Miriam, my father-in-law was involved in a terrible car accident. His life literally hung in the balance. Were it not for Hashem's mercy and my father-in-law's ability to self-diagnose his injuries and impress upon attending physicians what the appropriate intervention should be, he would have been lost to us then. So in hindsight, these past 26 years have been a blessing for us in the family and in the community, a blessing that we should never take for granted. It's customary at Levaya to ask mechila from the soul of the departed. Daddy, there's a mitzvah of both chamiv, showing respect for one's father-in-law, for which I know that I fell short. He asked your forgiveness for not having appreciated you sufficiently and shown you the proper respect. You are not one to demand respect, and even so I regret I did not do more to honor you, for that I ask you mechila. You be a Melis Yosher for the entire family. First and foremost, to Mami, your soulmate, partner in life, with whom you are literally inseparable. To provide her with the strength to cope with this devastating loss and to persevere. For your sister, your Aunt Gail, and Uncle Avi, that they only know of simcha and good health. For your children and grandchildren, and in Yitzhak Hashem, future generations. For all of your friends in the shul and the larger Silver Spring Jewish community, for all Chai Yisrael, that we speedily see the fulfillment of the prophecy of Yeshayahu, Bila HaMaves, L'Netzach, Mach Hashem Elokim Dima, Ya'al Kol Panim, Amen.
Miriam Adler.
As everyone has said thus far, no words are adequate to capture my father's essence. Yet I want my father's neshama to hear, to know how much we love him and appreciate him and respect him. And so I feel compelled to try to say a few words to highlight a few character traits, of which there are so many, that I admire When I think about Daddy, I think about your Nava. Just how humble and understated you were. You were so smart. You got scholarships, promotions, medical school awards, patient satisfaction awards, commendations. You have high school and college friends who every time I talk to them, they tell me they wouldn't have gotten through high school or college without your friendly tutoring services. And yet you wouldn't necessarily know that if you weren't talking to my father about something intellectual or academic of which you wanted advice or guidance. You never cared about status. You were very, what they call in New York, out of town in the best type of way. It didn't matter about yichus, what family someone was from. It didn't matter about how much money somebody had. It didn't matter about people's educational levels or what schools they went to. You were just good, and you appreciated everybody for who they were. You didn't care about associating with only this type of person or that type of person. You just cared about helping others. And you used all of your medical knowledge and spiritual awareness and talent to connect to other people and help. And you were constantly helping others. And I only know because others generally pretty much accost me in a very positive way and tell me how much you've helped them or their family or their friends. But you never say, oh, so-and-so emailed. I never knew from you. But I did have a feeling of pride growing up, that virtually every Shabbos, at least one person came to get a medical opinion, to get help. Something had happened. It was sad that something had happened, but, cut themselves with a challah knife, this, that. I had a feeling of you, Daddy, being an integral part of the community and being the type of person that people know they could come to at any time of day or night if they had a problem. You were also incredibly sincere. You just cared about doing what was right and good in Hashem's eyes, and you didn't give speeches about it, you just did it. And connected to that, you were a very growth-oriented person. Growth in the medical field, always looking for the newest and most up-to-date way of looking at things, adding on complementary and diet-related ways of helping yourself and helping patients. And spiritually, always looking to learn a little bit more, to integrate that into your life. I only found out in the last week that you really led our family to become from that you had the initial spark that encouraged Mommy. And every time we visited, especially in later years as we weren't young anymore and you had a little more time in your life, you would tell us about a shir you had recently gone to or a sefer that you had started reading and how it impacted you personally. I think of the phrase, amor ma'ad v'aseh harbeh, say little but do a lot. And I feel like that really applies to you. In social settings, you were a man of few words. You were more than happy to let my mother lead the social situations, and you enjoyed it, though. You enjoyed the close contact with the community. You had a big smile and a big handshake, and then you were more than happy to let others do most of the talking. But when there was something important to communicate, then you could say a lot. If somebody needed medical help, if somebody was interested in a book that you had read, if somebody needed support, if you were repeating the rabbi's drasha or class you had gone to, then you got into action. And even in our relationships, too, with the family. You were like the tickle monster when our kids were little. They would come over to you in your lap, and they had all sorts of tickling games of when to start and when to stop, and who got first and second, the tickle rights. And they could bring you piles and piles of books. And as my kids were recounting, unlike me and their father and most of us who would like skip pages and shorten, if there's like a whole few paragraphs in the Bernstein Bears, we'd kind of boil it down to just what the picture said and hope you didn't notice. My father would read every single word of all those stories, sometimes 10 or 20 in a row to all the grandchildren. And he was too honest to skip anything. And in terms of Rabbi, my father was also constantly driving way past what we thought he should be doing at his age. Constantly driving to go to our events, to go to our kids' things, to go here and there and visit us and show his love. And taking care of anything that needed to get taken care of. As a therapist, one of the buzzword concepts that we talk about is that a child needs to have a sense of a secure base. That a child needs to feel like their parents are there for them and will always be there for them and have unconditional love in order to self-actualize and have the courage to face the world and all of its challenges. And there's no question that both of my parents have given me and all of my siblings that. And that Daddy, you were really just that. You might sometimes just be sitting there with that big smile on your face and a big hug ready if we wanted one. But we just knew that you loved us so much. And you were proud of any accomplishments, but you never pressured us to have them. You never pressured us about what our grades were or anything like that. You just loved us for who we are and appreciated us and gave us the sense that no matter what, you and Mommy are always there for us and our families. My parents, as many of you might know, have lots of quotes in their house hanging up. That's probably my mother that hung them up. But my father enjoyed them. Dad typed them up. Oh, see, that's Rabbi. My father typed them up. So one of them that they had for a long time, they occasionally flip out old ones and new ones, was, tell me who you admire, and I'll tell you who you are. And I'd like to say that it was very clear from whom my father admired and spoke about who he was as a person. I never once remember hearing him talk about where somebody went to school or how much money they made or what they bought. What I heard my father talk about are people who went against all odds to become that they were today. People that inspired others. People that stood up to the bad guys in whatever form. People who had new and innovative ways of thinking about things. People who were leaders. And that could be in a host of array of places. It could be somebody he met at a Shabbos table who was telling a personal story of inspiration about how they became a Baal Tshuva. It could be a story from Mishpach or Ami that really touched him that he would save to tell us next time he saw us. It could be about a scientist or a medical doctor or someone in cancer research who saw things differently than other people and wasn't afraid to stand up for it, even if their colleagues didn't give them the respect they deserved. It could be somebody who stood up and spoke against others who were bullying or insensitive. And it could be from all sorts of places. Things that happened in real life that he admired and respected about people who you wouldn't necessarily guess. That's the only time I heard him talk about people, is to say wonderful things about a person that you might not otherwise know about them. That you should know that this person is very inspiring, that this happened or that happened, and they were able to get through it, and we should all learn from them. My father was a person of integrity and values and character. He valued personal strength. He actually, as a child, I didn't know that I guess it's true that his pictures don't show him smiling. He had a very difficult life as a child. My aunt being a highlight of his life. But his parents were immigrants, and they owned a grocery store. The grocery store was robbed a number of times. As my aunt told me, my father courageously, as a teen or young adult, chased after one of the people who held them up at knife point. Then, of course, his parents reprimanded them and said, "Never do that again. You could have gotten killed. Just let them take the money." He had a difficult life in a lot of ways in his younger years, but he himself persevered and always had a smile on his face, at least after he met my mother and as long as I knew him. So, Daddy, I am so sad that all of your children's children and grandchildren won't get to know you in the same way, palpably with your physical presence. That they won't get to actually feel your warm, all-embracing hugs, or your big handshakes, or your big smile and your booming voice. Again, you didn't, if there wasn't something specific we didn't need help with, we didn't always have long conversations, but you just sat there and beamed at us like anything we did or said was perfect. And you just sat on the sofa, sending love through the air. And all my kids felt that. I'm sure everyone's did. And I know I and all my siblings will do our best to communicate who you were and what you stood for, and all the family love that we felt. We will do our best. In the last year, when you were more flexible on Fridays with your work schedule, you called to give Erev Shabbos brachos, and my kids called you to get them. Again, in that booming, cantorial, beautiful, effervescent voice. We are so thankful for the beautiful, loving home that you and Mommy built for us. May we be zocha to bring you nachas and to emulate your ways.
Meredith Ben Shachar.
Daddy, I will always admire your integrity, your honesty, your hardworking nature, your generosity. After long days of work, you opened your home to patients free of charge, and you did it with a smile, and you honestly felt good about it and happy to do it. I'll always admire your humility. You never saw yourself as someone deserving of any kind of kavod. You always put others before yourself. Devotion, your devotion to Mommy, you always wanted Mommy to be happy. Everything was always about, well, Mommy will be happy, let's do that. Mommy will be happy, that's what Mommy wants. And Keil, you were the most devoted big brother. When your parents were working long, hard hours in the store, you were charged with taking care of her, and instead of complaining like some of today's generation maybe sometimes possibly theoretically could complain about, you were always happy to take care of Aunt Gail, and you felt great being a big brother, uncle type to Aunt Gail. You took such good care of her. And to us, you always wanted the best for us, Daddy. Sometimes you would go 10 years without buying a new suit and be wearing a suit that had holes in like unobtrusive like places that nobody would notice, but you always made sure we had what we needed. 26 years ago, when you had a devastating car accident and we didn't know if you'd make it through the night, you made me promise not to tell Mommy because you didn't want to ruin her first solo trip in 20 plus years of marriage. Of course, I didn't listen to you because I called Aunt Gail and she said, Your mother needs to know. But you, with tears in your eyes, you held my hand and said, please don't tell Mommy. It's the one time she ever did anything for herself. I don't want to ruin it. That's you, Daddy. Even when your life was hanging in the balance, you didn't want to upset Mommy. You're always so loving. You treated each one of the 7 of us as your only child, and each grandchild as your favorite. Sometimes other Zadis would tell you they had a hard time recognizing each grandchild's voice when they would call. You had no problem. You always knew who it was. You loved to call our children Cookie, and they love it. My kids were saying, we always love Zadie calling us Cookie. But you recognized each of their names, and you always sound like it made, when you would answer the phone, you always sound like it made your day to hear that child or grandchild or child-in-law's voice. And you really took immense pleasure, Daddy, in being part of our lives and our children's lives. When my son, my oldest, was applying for internships for this summer, you called him. You wanted to know how the interview went and what kind of computer work would it be. You really cared. You had things going on in your life, but you cared about Svi's internship. And with Nechama's seminary applications, you were so excited after every interview. You wanted the play-by-play, and you wanted to know the pros and cons and help her make the decision. You had so much going on in your life this year, but this is what you cared about. And Yehuda, when he started a new high school, you wanted the pros and cons of each option. And then when he started, you would call to ask him how it went, how he liked his Rebbe's, how he liked the secular. And my daughter Meira, she had an overnight 2 weeks ago when Daddy was aware. He was in a lot of pain from this infection, but he was aware. He was on the phone. We were on speakerphone one night, and Meira told Zadie, tomorrow I have an overnight in camp. And Shlomo piped up from the background, oh, guess what, Meira? Zadie and I are having an overnight also, because Shlomo did not leave my father's side. We were all extremely devoted, and we took turns sleeping with my father in the hospital, but Shlomo for 3 weeks straight got maybe 2 nights sleep not in the hospital. And one of them was driving to Haskin back, so I don't think he slept that night. And when Shlomo said, Meira, Zadie and I are having an overnight, Daddy laughed. He thought it was exciting. He was sick in the hospital, and he was excited that his granddaughter was having an overnight. And my daughter Chanala, she did a biography report this year where she had to dress up as J.K. Rowling, and she went over every detail with my father. He heard about what vest she was going to wear and how she was going to decorate her project. And he cared. He acted like it was like neuroscience she was teaching him. He was so excited because his grandchild was excited. You were so much fun, like my sister said, my children said to me last night. Remember how we would each grab like 5 or 10 books, sit on the couch, and Zadie would spend 3 or 4 hours reading to us? That was Daddy. He had his spot on the couch, his favorite spot on the couch. As long as he had some coffee to drink, he would read books till infinity. And he used silly voices with them. He called them Cookie. They loved it. Daddy, you were selfless. One small example that came to mind for my high school graduation, you worked the day before, you worked a full day's work. You drove through the night to Philadelphia to pick up your mother-in-law, Baba Nora. Then you drove back, you worked the next day, you attended my graduation and drove all night to bring Baba Nora back. You didn't think there was anything special about that, losing almost 2 full nights sleep just to bring your mother-in-law so she could get nachas at my graduation? It had to be done, so you did it. That's my daddy. Daddy, you were kind, pure, and caring. This past week, you gave us a tremendous gift. Like my esteemed brother-in-law said, you gave us a tremendous gift. You made sure that we would have no regrets, and none of us would feel like we weren't there for you. This whole time since your diagnosis, which was actually a really short period of time, 5 or 6 weeks, right, cousin? Yeah, 5 or 6 weeks. It was such a short time. We really were all there for you. But this past week was unparalleled. Every single one of us dropped everything and just came. And you gave us that week to spend focused on each other and really focused on you. And we never focused only on you because you were always in the background loving us and being there. You were the solid foundation of our home, but you didn't draw attention to yourself. But this week, in your non-responsiveness, you're just being there. You were the focus of attention. We were all kissing you. We were talking to you. We were stroking you, singing to you. We surrounded you this week with love, with Tehillim. I know it'll come as a shock to you, but a lot of Nigunim. and then more love, more Tehillim, and yes, shockingly, more Nigunim. And family memories. We would periodically giggle about family memories, and then sometimes at night when those of us that were bunking in the hospital and we took turns with it, we would start giggling about our arrangements. And there was one night the first night, that the ridiculous chair they had in the hospital, it was like an was an I Love Lucy moment. It was like Shlomo was holding one end, my mother was sitting on it, Miriam and I were holding the other end. We couldn't get it to open right, and then we got it to open right, it closed, and we just were sitting and laughing. We're like, Daddy, we're sorry, we're laughing in front of you, like when you're so sick, but it was funny. Daddy wouldn't have minded. He would have been happy that we were, I'm sure he heard us, and he liked that we were laughing about a silly I Love Lucy moment where we couldn't get the silly chair to recline. Then we figured out you needed a taller person. The next night, Ruvain slept in it, was totally fine. You needed a taller person than my mother to sleep in it, so we gave her the other, we thought that was the most comfortable spot, we gave her a different spot. Daddy, you gave us one last chance to be B'kayim the mitzvah of Kibbud Av while you were in this world. Thank you so much. It was such a gift. And I thought about it on Motzei Shabbos. We were so scared over Shabbos, all of me and my siblings and our children. We were nauseous, sick to our stomach about what we were going to hear and if the door would open and if somebody would come back. We were nauseous and anxious the entire Shabbos. And when we got the news from Arthur a little bit after Shabbos that Daddy was still with us, but things were moving, our spouses told us to shower first, but then we went to the hospital, and on our way there, my sister and I were talking about maybe Daddy was just waiting for all of us to get there. We were all there, but maybe he was waiting for us to all, instead of being at the house, we were split up, even though we were all there, sometimes we were in different rooms. Maybe Daddy was just waiting for us all to get there, and I think that's what it was. He could be with us one last time, together. Daddy, I always felt like I was your little girl. I know Miriam was your little girl also, but I always felt like each of us was your favorite. And this Friday night, when our husbands were giving our children brachos, it hit me. It always made me feel so young. Whenever we spent Shabbos with Mommy and Daddy would give me a bracha. And I have children, Baruch Hashem, and they're growing up, but it made me feel like a little girl instead of just a mommy and wife, which is wonderful, but it made me feel like a little girl. Daddy, I will miss your brachos. I loved your brachos. I loved being a little girl and bending down and getting a bracha along with my kids. When I was born, Mommy said I looked so much like you, she couldn't believe I was a girl, that a girl could have the same face as a man. And I still do think I look like a woman, and I think my daddy looks like a man. I do not have a beard, but I was always proud that people recognized that I look like my father, like Daddy. And then there was this really cute story I remember with Mנחam and Maleh, and we were very close growing up. And one Shabbos, Mנחam came to me and said, could you come to my house after shul and we'll just have lunch together and play the whole day? And her father said yes, and her mother was on shul. Mr. Maleh said sure, and then I went to find my daddy, and I pulled on his pants sleeve, and I said, Daddy, can I go to Necham's house? I was probably 6 or 7. And the man that looked down at me was not my daddy. And I was like, oh, I felt like hysterical. And then I was like hysterical. I was crying. And then my father just all of a sudden, these big, strong arms. Obviously, someone said, your little girl's crying. These big, strong arms picked me up and hugged me and said, it's me. Everything's fine. You wasn't someone scary. It was a normal guy from shul. And if you want to go to Necham's, you can go to Necham's. And at that point, I was so scared that he had to walk me with Mr. Maleh to Necham's because I was so scared that I touch another daddy. But that was my daddy. He picked me up and just with his big, strong arms, it's okay, Mary, I'm here. Daddy, you nicknamed me Mary, and it really stuck. And it really, all my life, I felt like it described my personality. You called me and Miriam your M&Ms. You made us feel great about our chocolate brown eyes. People talk about having blue eyes. Yeah, I know my kids who do. I love it. You're gorgeous. But I never felt like I was missing. Like, I had chocolate brown eyes. Who wouldn't want chocolate brown eyes, especially when you love chocolate? When I was a little girl, you felt like I needed some special daddy time, so you took me for Suzuki violin lessons, and it was like you had nothing else to do in the world but once a week sit for an hour with me and my violin teacher learning Suzuki violin. When Tal picked me up for our first date, it's so funny because people asked me afterwards, did you mind you were dating someone with a beard? As soon as I saw him, there was a familiar look, like something just felt like home. Obviously, I had to like him, he had to be wonderful, all that, but there was something about Tal that just looked like home. Because Tal had that trim beard, has that trim beard like my father, and he's tall and broad. Just like that familiar daddy look. My daughter asked me last week when I wasn't home and my husband was lovingly taking care of her at home, but she, Baruch Hashem, missed her mommy. It's good she likes mommy. And she asked me one note over the phone, she said, Mommy, I don't understand. Everyone says it's so good to go to Shemayim, but why is it so hard for us down here? And I didn't have an answer for her. I don't have an answer. It is so hard. It is so good for Daddy's neshama. He's at peace. He's at the Kisei HaKavod, and here we are. We miss our daddy. We'll miss him forever. I don't have an answer for you, sweetheart. Somehow this is the way Hashem's world works. I don't know. Daddy, I will love you forever. I'll miss you for always. Wherever I am, I'll always be thinking of you and carrying you in my heart and teaching your values and your integrity to my children. And I'll always feel surrounded by your love when I think of you. please be a Melitz Yosher. Yosher for Mommy, for Aunt Gail, for each of us children, for the grandchildren you have, the grandchildren in Mirza Hashem you will have, for your great-grandchild and the great-grandchildren you will have, and for the whole Silver Spring community who has really rallied around us, the Bikur Cholem, the Helping Hands. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that we're able to be nourished and fed without having to think about it. Kadosh Baruch Hu, please take good care of my daddy. He took such good care of us. Please take good care of him. I love you, Daddy, and I'll love you forever.
Arthur Gaisin.
As you heard from a number of others, Dad, and as you all probably know as well firsthand, Dad had an eclectic variety of interests. But his interests weren't just intellectual in nature. If he felt strongly enough about something, he had the fortitude to transform his life and habits around that new view. We saw this in his religious beliefs as he started a new family in the community around 40 years ago. And we saw it throughout his life as he was adapting his health and diet and his lifestyle around that. To illustrate how varied Dad's interests were, I'm going to take a little stroll down my own memory lane, running through some examples that come to mind. When it came to health, in the 90s, before it was mainstream, he got into hypnosis and meditation in his office practice. They were services he was providing, and he would practice with us. And I remember reading some of his books about sensory deprivation float tanks, and that was before it was cool. Also back in the 90s, he was into low-carb ketogenic diets. He was vegetarian for many years. Buckwheat, lentils, spelt, kashi, they were all typical foods in our house growing up. I remember when Dad went through the phase where he was cooking shiitake mushrooms in the wok all the time. When it came to hobbies, I remember photography was a huge one for me. He built a darkroom in the basement. He taught me, and we learned together how to develop film and large photos, and it was a creative outlet that I enjoyed throughout high school and beyond. I remember we would build and shoot off the model rockets, which was huge fun as a kid. We did karate for a number of years. Dad had a black belt in Taekwondo, right? We built electronic kits like transistor radios. We put together model airplanes. Daniel was reminding me in the hospital the other day when he brought liquid nitrogen from the office, showed us how to shatter grapes, and it was just neat stuff, blew your mind. Dad was tech savvy. In addition to medical interests and everything, he was always trying to stay on top of technology, researching new devices and gadgets, and specifically remember that Commodore 64. We didn't go fishing very often, but I do have distinct memories when we were at the beach growing up, and we went fishing and then caught and ate the fish, and I just have memories of that. It was fun. Whenever we did go to the beach, Dad pretty much was either always dressed up or hospital greens. There was nothing in between with Dad. It was, that was his casual clothing. It was only recently that we introduced him to sweatpants, I think in the past 3 weeks. A few just snapshots or vignettes. I mean, I remember growing up, my dad was always helping the community. There were always people calling or coming into the house, and my dad was going places to help people out, and I always felt proud of him helping others in the community. I remember in the summers, I sometimes had the opportunity to work for my dad in his offices. At one point, he had 3 offices, and he would travel between them during the week, and it was craziness, I imagined. Can't imagine doing that myself now, but between Annapolis, Bowie, and Kensington, he would travel between these offices, and I just loved seeing him in his element, just seeing the man I looked up to totally in his element at work, having fun with the staff and patients, doing what he loved with a passion, ultimately helping and healing people. Zadie, he loved spending time with his grandkids, engaging them in just playful conversation. Zadie always had a smile. Dad was an amazing violinist also, and I remember at one point just being fascinated with that, and I was begging him to teach me how to play. And he tried many times, but I definitely was not a good student. Did not work out that well. I remember one time in probably middle school colliding with a friend on the soccer field and just bashed up my nose and needed stitches, but I felt so proud that my dad could stitch it up for me. I remember going to his office and getting ice cream afterwards. He loved singing, as we all know. The Kiddush, Havdalah with the blue flame, Zemiris around the Shabbos table. That was always a highlight of the week growing up. I remember taking long walks. At one point, it was something he was into, and we would take long walks along Flago Creek on Shabbos. I remember my favorite series for a while growing up was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. I loved it, and I read it cover to cover. And I think the reason I loved it so much was because it was actually gifted to Dad from a patient who appreciated his, dermatologic diagnostic skill. And the inscription in the book was, "You solved the mystery." I just remember that. I remember going through a particularly prickly phase in my teens, and my dad didn't lecture me. Instead, he bought me a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People and suggested that I read it, which I did. I'm sure I could reread it. Looking back, many of the things he introduced me to at a young age are things I came back to later in life and also now try to do with my own kids. And reflecting a bit, some lessons from Dad that just stood out to me. I think we've heard some of them, but I'll reinforce. My dad led by example. Never any complaints, never lectures. He was just the thing that he was trying to teach. He was that thing, and that's how we learned. There was always huge sacrifice and selflessness. Everything he did was for his family, and he was humble as can be. He was always learning, exploring, growing. He was always reading, thinking, and discussing things with anyone that was interested. And he seemed to surround himself with friends that were expert in some area that he could learn from. Dad was strong, a fighter, and I'm pretty sure he had 9 lives. Over the past week in the hospital, some of us were just recounting, going over the math, and unfortunately it was not hard to come up with 9 life-threatening events, most of which he had overcome. We also saw firsthand his amazing will to live and overcome challenges each time he faced them. He didn't stop or give up. He kept an optimistic outlook, and he kept plugging away. He had a tremendous balance with my mom through their partnership. Mom and Dad each tipped the scales in certain qualities, but together they completed each other. The past month plus has been a tremendous challenge in every way, but I feel blessed that we had the opportunity to spend quality time with Dad and together as a family. What's most important in the end is that we all came together as a family and as a community to support not only my dad, but also my mom. And we thank you all for the continued support.
Daniel Gaisin.
Dear Daddy, it was only a little over a month ago that we found out you were sick. And we knew that we had limited time left with you, but we never imagined how short it would be. You were constantly on my mind, worrying about you and dreading what was to come. That first Shabbos after we found out you were sick, I couldn't get through a Shabbos meal without crying. Shabbos was such a central part of our family life growing up. The family around the Shabbos table singing Shalom Aleichem and Eshes Chayil, the Friday night blessing of the children, the Kiddush, and Havdalah. As I went through each of these components of Shabbos with my family, it reminded me of you and Mommy and our home growing up where I learned all of this. All the melodies I use, I learned from you, and it made me so sad to think that my role model and my teacher may not be with us much longer. And such a good memory of you. Even after I grew up and I moved out of the house and I was older, you would still try and make sure to call me almost every Friday to give me the Shabbos blessing. I recently read an essay with one of my sons, by a former New York Yankees baseball player. And one passage caught my eye since I felt that it really epitomized you, Daddy. And I quote, "And throughout 20 years in pinstripes, I learned that despite the pace and the pressure, one code truly makes this city go. Get up each day, put on your uniform, go to work, do your best, and don't make excuses." And in describing you, Daddy, I would actually add another clause, and put on a smile. This was you. You were a man who did what was expected of him day in and day out. For many years you had trouble with your mobility, but you didn't complain or make excuses. You always did what you had to do. Every morning you got up and got out to work, do your job, take care of your patients, and you did it with a genuine smile. You always greeted people with a disarming smile and made them feel comfortable and welcome. But ultimately, everything you did was to really take care of your family. The day after we found out you were sick was Father's Day weekend, and my children brought home from school, beautiful Father's Day cards and projects. I just want to share with you one of them that I received, because it really made me think of my father. "Dear Daddy, just like a farmer when planting a tree toils endlessly so the best fruits he will see, parents work their whole life for their children to learn and grow, to nurture those seedlings they so carefully did sow. Tree, O tree, with what should I bless you? That your fruit be sweet, your shade be plentiful, that a spring of water should run beneath you. Rather, may it be God's will that all the trees planted from your seeds should be like you. Daddy, may it be God's will that all your efforts you invested in your children should bring out the best fruits there can be. Daddy, I appreciate your hard work and sacrifice that went into providing a good, comfortable life for your family. I appreciate all your efforts in providing a Jewish life and education for us. I love you and will miss you forever."
Jeremy Gaisin.
I am heartbroken beyond words. I can't think too cogently at the moment. My eyes are overrun with tears, and my soul yearns to have you back with us, Daddy. I feel like Tisha B'Av came early this year and in a way that is more palpable than ever for me. Daddy, you exhibited such patience and kindness and didn't need much to make you happy. I admired, even if I couldn't always relate to, how you were happy with simple things. My father was samech b'chalko, happy with his lot. He and my mom together were a joy to behold. I never saw a more beautiful, radiant couple. You were such a pair. Sometimes, Dad, you just smiled as Mom filled in more conversation, and sometimes Mom would smile or wait with bated breath as you'd regale us with heartwarming religious stories you found, or fascinating medical stories and things beyond our regular scope of understanding or knowledge. Dad, you had such a hungry curiosity for life and God, and you seemed on a constant mission to learn more, and wanted to teach us lessons from what you gleaned. You were even working on a family book of sorts to help us know more about health and medicine. Daddy, your loving, patient style was really something I admire. I have so much to learn from you still. And you had such a big heart. Actually, even towards the end, after the devastating stroke that made the last several days of your life on this earth so hard, we were told you had a good, strong heartbeat. And it made sense to us because you had such a good heart, that we knew. And your heart beat for Mommy. And in a heartbeat, you would be available to help one of us out with something, or look up medical information for someone, or go watch some grandkids, or look at a skin rash of someone in the community, or someone in the family, or someone you didn't know. Even when you were in urgent care with severe discomfort, you were willing to take time and effort to try and message with medical advice for my friend's son's skin rash that it seemed they could use some more feedback on. Daddy, you were selfless, and you were not a complainer. What you would state was your level of pain when a nurse would ask you was several notches below what a standard person would call the same level of pain, we learned. As I'm clouded with sadness and inability to think straight at the moment, I'd like to quote from friends from some of the recent outpourings of caring messages I've received. Noam Stern told me, "Growing up, I felt your house to be full of love and warmth. Your father always seemed to treat people with kindness, and I know that you carry on his spirit. Even as a kid, I felt a connection to your father as he was my mohel. In his honor, I will try to live more like him and have a warm and open household. David Katzber said, your dad was an amazing man, so kind-hearted and always had so much joy in his face. I'm sorry that we lost a great Kohen today. Rafi Muller mentioned that it's a huge loss for the community and all of Am Yisrael. Rebecca Grass said, your father was a beautiful person. I have clear memories of him. He pierced my ears when I was 8. He was so gentle and kind and trustworthy. Cindy Bauman said, your dad, Zeichel Livracha, and your dear mom, she should live and be well until 120 years plus, brought up a beautiful and special family. We will always cherish our times together. Nathan Franco said, there are no words to describe how sorry and devastated I am by this tragic loss of such a great man. Sippy Rosenblatt said, your father was so kind and dedicated his life to healing others, and such an interesting person to talk to. We always enjoyed his company. May your beautiful memories be a source of comfort during this very sad time. Dan Kugler and family said, your father has been so special to our entire family. He has always been there for us when we were in need. He was one of the kindest people I have ever met. We will miss him tremendously. Josh Lawrence told me, your father was a wonderful, brilliant, amazing person. My heart is with you and your family. And Josh, who I was born just a few days apart from, encouraging me to hang in there, mentioned, remember your father's strength, patience, and wisdom. He always seemed so satisfied with life, even when there may have been a ton of crazy kids, us, our friends, and your siblings, wreaking havoc around the house. One of my favorite early memories is your father singing Havdalah in your house and lighting the dancing blue flames. That was always a special treat. Another family friend, Nomi Gerstel Charnow, when you were so sick and unconscious, Daddy, called me for a belated birthday call and reminisced too about your Havdalah. As a side note, this past English birthday was an incredibly despondent one. I hope to never have another filled with such despair. But even with this sadness, the family was banded together, and there was so much love in the hospital room. Amidst all that was so bleak, the family tried to make it sweet for me, even if it was only able to be bittersweet. And there were some birthday treats and a semblance of happiness. I'm sure you would have wanted us to try and be happy. And with you in the room together, even if unconscious, it seemed almost as if you could celebrate my birthday with me. I just wish we'd be able to celebrate yours with you this year. It gives such a disconsolate feeling to know you won't be here to celebrate your upcoming birthday. I hope you were shepping nachas at us trying to have some joy, even as it was so heartbreaking to see you, our dear father and patriarch, in such an incapacitated state. On that call, while reminiscing about old times with the Gaisin household, Nomi told me she wasn't used to such melodious singing at Havdalah. Daddy, you and Mommy created such a warm and beautiful environment in which guests could feel comfortable, relish the beauty of Jewish rituals which you and Mommy had delved into and drawn yourselves close to as a young married couple, and feel like one big family. As if it wasn't big already, you found room in your hearts and home for more. After you passed away, Daddy, Nomi told me he was such a wonderful man who left a gigantic legacy. Just look in the mirror. While I wish I would live up to your legacy better, Daddy, I know you will help me from Shemayim. Daddy, I want to ask you, Mechila. I hope you forgive me for my shortcomings and if I ever wronged you. And I'm sorry, I still haven't gotten my act together and gotten married yet. I know one day when I do get married, with God's help, you will be there with me, Mommy, and the whole family. And maybe you will even help pull some strings in Shemayim to help that day come sooner. You are such a supporting and loving father, and when I'd sometimes worry too much, you had your kind and relaxed way of telling me, don't worry about it, Jeremy. And just a little anecdote I want to add. I remember we were at a hospital, this was at a doctor's office. It was a little bit of a blur, all that went on the last number of weeks. We were at a doctor's office, and I think the nurse was doing some paper, and she said, are you Alan Gaisin? And he said, last time I checked. He had such a wit. He had such a joie de vivre, simchas achayim, and I will miss seeing your smile in person, but I will cherish pictures and memories. Thank you for being my father. I am lucky to be your son. If I will be even a fraction of as loving and supportive a father as you, I will have succeeded. If I can live up to even a fraction of the wonderful role model you are, I will be a mensch worthy of carrying your name and legacy. I love you. I will always love you. And I miss you beyond words infinitely.
Ruvain Gaisin.
My father was a man of integrity, a man that had deep faith and emunah in Hashem. He was yashar, he was a family man, dignified, patient, humble, peaceful. He was an ohev shalom, rodeh shalom, ohev esabrios. He was kind and generous. He truly put everyone's needs before his own. He was an esteemed physician and a caring, compassionate doctor. He is my role model. There are no words to describe the gaping hole that is now left in my heart and the heart of my family. My father's greatest joy was his family. He had 7 children, 20 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Each of us felt his unconditional love as if we were his only child or grandchild. And we still feel it so strongly as if he were still here with us today, holding our hand, sharing comforting words during this difficult time. There are no words to describe the special bonds he built with each one of us. He made us each feel so special. He made great efforts to visit his children and grandchildren on a regular basis. He would drop everything else he had to do to go to celebrate birthday parties, graduation, siyumim, or just to visit. No distance was too far for him to travel. He taught us that there is nothing more important than family, and celebrating with family takes precedence. Everything else could wait. Daddy, he was our rock, and he was our sounding board to bounce off ideas. We always go to you for advice and guidance when we go through challenging times. But now you are not here to help guide us through the most challenging time we think we've ever experienced, ever. I wish you were here to comfort us. The bond that my father created with his children and grandchildren was so strong and can never be broken. It was the biggest privilege to be in the presence of Zadie. Always, we will always love him. I won't speak for so long. I just wanted to share one story in Maseches Tainus about Abba Umana, Abba the doctor. He merited to receive a bas kol from the Heavenly Academy every single day, asking about his welfare. Abaye received these greetings every Erev Shabbos, and Rava received these only on Erev Yom Kippur. The Gemara says the reason why Abba Umana merited to receive these greetings every day was because of his sensitivity and concern and the tznius he held for his patients. When he performed bloodletting for a woman, he would have her put on he made a special cover to keep her modesty. He would not treat men and women together, and he also had a special payment box in a hidden place. His policy was that whoever could afford to pay would pay, whoever could not afford would not pay. But nobody would know who paid and who didn't pay. That means that people wouldn't be embarrassed. When a Talmud Chacham would come to Abba Umana, he would not take money from him. Instead, not only would he not take money, he would actually give the Talmud Chacham money to buy food and help him recover from the procedure. Even though Rava and Abaye, the great Amoraim we've all heard of, Abba Umana still merited to receive more frequent heavenly greetings. He reached a certain level because he had special opportunities as a doctor that Amoraim did not have. This was my father. My father followed the path of Abba Umana. Daddy had tremendous dedication, care, and concern for all of his patients. His patients loved him. He helped people get better without thinking of profit. He helped people because it was the right thing to do and he cared. People talk about all that stuff. The mission Hashem gave him was to help others, and he fulfilled that mission. He practiced medicine in the same way that he lived his life, with devotion and uncompromising love and care. Daddy, we are going to miss your warm smile, your birkas habanim. We will miss our Shabbos and Yom Tov meals together and singing zmiros with you. We're going to miss your beautiful voice. We're going to miss your heartwarming stories that you would tell us, the fascinating discussions. We're going to miss the Pesach Sedarim, the impromptu coloring visits with our children. Sometimes he would just come over just to see the kids. We'll miss walking to shul with you, driving to New Jersey and back, showing you our kids' rashes. We're going to miss everything about you, Daddy. Everything. You are my role model. I hope I can build a family like you and Mommy. I admire you. I'm inspired by the way you lived your life, by your shalom bias, and the way you raised us. I daven that my family should always give you nachas ruach and always give Mommy. Umacha Adonai Elohim Dima Me'al Kol Panim. The Lord God will wipe tears off all faces.
Shlomo Gaisin.
to eulogize for Kibbut Avayim, Kibbut Amaze. The question that I'm struck with is, how do you eulogize someone like the name of Hashem, someone who's ineffable, is beyond any words? So the best place to go is the Talmud, is the Gemara. Like it says in Shabbos, it says, one of the Tanaim asked another student, what was your father most careful about? Avuch, b'mai zahar tfei. What was your father most vigilant about, most particular about? And so, there's obviously, Daddy, I can't possibly describe the immense amount of goodness that you were in this world, and that you are in this world forever and ever. But I could talk about a few things which I think are pertinent, since we are humans too, and we need to learn from you. As Rav Yoel in Eretz Yisrael said about my father to my brother Jeremy and I, he says, an ish tzaddik, tamim haya b'deraisav. I think he was an ish because I think he was all these words. He was an ish tzaddik tamim haya b'deraisav. My father was a very unique person in his generation. On the level of ish, he was such a human being. As a doctor, he was such a respected person. He was such a mensch. He was such an erlich yid. That my niece was saying. My niece Esther was saying that one time there was a Muslim patient, and my father was so well versed in medicine that as he gave her the regular things, he wasn't allowed to tell extra things. But he would hint, if you want me to tell you things that would work according to your culture, I'm also happy to tell you, like things you could heal yourself with, such as from your Muslim culture. I don't know whether the person did or did not, but I do know that that was the type of person that my father was. He treated every person exactly how they were. If they were Muslim, he respected them. If they were Jewish, he loved them. If they were whoever they were, he was an ish. He was a person. He was a real person. He was a mensch in this world, and he made a kiddush Hashem in his work. He was also a tzaddik, because like my Rav who's here, Dovid Pinson, says that who is a tzaddik? One who makes you feel like a tzaddik. And I really feel that my father made each and every child feel like a tzaddik, and he made each and every friend, and he made my mom feel like a tzaddik. He was really a mensch in that way, and he was really a tzaddik. And he was tamim, because I've never been with such a person who's so present in every single moment that they're in. My father was really, like Rashi says in the pasuk about tamim, that you shouldn't be darish atidus. My father was not trying to figure out what would be in the future. He just wanted to be as present in the present moment as he could, because he realized there was a present. And also my father was an ish. He was a real human being. He was a real person. He took care of his guf. Every food that went into his mouth was premeditated, whether it was actually good for his body or not. I've never met such a person. Every drink, even in the hospital, he was only allowed to, before he was not even able to eat because it was so painful, he didn't just want to eat whatever they gave him. First of all, it had to be kosher. Second of all, he wanted to make sure that it was actually going to be good for him. My father was always growing. Because of my father, my mother was also inspired. My father had that first spark of to be a Baal Tshuva, and he inspired my mom. And because of them, there's 3 Doros Yisharim that they brought into the world and counting. And we just started the 3rd Dor Yashar. My father was out of here always growing. And I know you're going to continue to grow in Shemaim, the tzaddikim, every year. And we know that whatever a person was in life, that is the way to continue to be in Shemaim. So I know my father's going to continue to seek knowledge. I told my father, please don't settle. Sir, you didn't get to go to yeshiva in this world, but in the next world, you have so many yeshivas, Derkiya, and the Shemaim, and I want to make sure that you find the right one. And I told my father last week on Sunday, he should be particular. If he wants to try the Shia of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, at this point, there is no language barrier. He could understand Aramaic, he could understand Hebrew. And I told him a whole slew of tzaddikim, Talmidei Chachamim, that I want him to try. So I'm excited for my father to experience that. Because that's his way. That even afterlife, he's still going to be experiencing growth, because there's a whole nother life. It's really just a birth. He's birthing into a whole new dimension of himself. And he's finally going to have the wings He was so immobile the past couple of years, the past decade. But he's finally going to have the wings to fly to any base midrash. He won't have to worry about being wheeled in a wheelchair. He won't have to be limited by that. My father was always growing. I remember, like maybe 3 years ago, he got so excited about Shmir Salashon. And he said, Shlomo, I want to tell you what we have on our table now. We have a machzam lepeh. Now we have on our table every day, the people should see that we're careful about our words. And it was very much like the way he was careful about his food. And also for my father, some people read the news and some people realize that the newest news is really in the Torah. Tuv is the Torah. But my father, he was able to read the news and know what was going on. It wasn't a dichotomy. But still, the Torah was the newest thing he's ever read. Every time he read something in Torah, he was so excited about it. The difference between a philosopher and a scientist. Abram Joshua Heschel says that a scientist sees something 1,000 times, sees something and they think they know it. But a philosopher looks at something they could see 1,000 times and they still realize how much they don't know about it. And they're still stuck in wonder. And that's the way my father was his whole life. He had that childhood, he had that childlike wonder that drove him through everything in life, whether it was medicine, whether it was his children. He always realized that his children had sodos that were still to be found. And he always realized how his grandchildren were still a chiddush. The chiddush of life was never old to him. He was really tapped into them. So my father was an ish tzaddik tamim hayavad yosef. He was one of a kind, and there never will be someone just like him. And Daddy, the other thing about you is you were really a dugma chai of shalom bayis, both in relationship to your wife, to my mother, but also in relationship to your children. The people say that this solar system is a heliocentric system, but I think it's a Sheila-centric solar system. For my father, the whole world revolved around my mother and her comfort and her needs and the family. He was so committed. He didn't care about outside of his Dalet Amos. He was a tamim. He mamish was a tamim. He cared about my mother, and knowing that she's happy made him happy. And knowing that his children were happy made him happy. His eyes weren't perusing outside to other homes. And he was so family-centric. I remember just in terms about how much he loved my mother. And everyone who's ever seen them together, they're one of a kind. They're one of a kind couple that never was, never will be like that. But it's one example. I remember one day I was in Kiddush and Shul in this sanctuary, in this hall, and Daddy, I remember talking to you. I saw my father sitting at the corner, like as Kiddush started. 10 minutes later, he's still sitting there talking to no one. 20 minutes later, maybe one friend came over for 5 minutes, and 30 minutes later, he's still sitting there. And meanwhile, the Kiddush is starting to fade out. My mom's, talking to everyone. She was so friendly. And so I asked my father, I was like, Daddy, should I walk you home? Do you want to go home together? He said, no, I'm fine. But I was like, Daddy, you're not talking to anyone. Why are you here? And my father said, because, and he said my mom's name, because Mom wants to stay here. So even, I want to stay here as long as Mom wants to stay here. I was like, Dad, Mom's going to be here for another hour. It's an hour and a half. And he's like, I know she's going to be the last one, but if she wants to be here, I want to be here. What kind of shalom bayis is that? I've never heard of such a thing. And I really yearn for such a thing. I want to be that way with my future wife. Be'ezras Hashem, Sha'at Tov U'Mitzlachas. And so I encourage everybody to really, 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 if there's one takeaway, and we're going to say a few more things, but if there's one takeaway you can take away from my father, give everything to your spouse. Make sure your whole life is dedicated to your spouse. My father lived that. Anyone who saw my father already knows this, but just please remember that, because there's so many broken homes in this generation. And Hayav Adar, he was in this generation. It's possible. We have the capacity to have real shalom bayis. Otherwise, Hashem wouldn't bless us with it. Wouldn't challenge us with it. The other thing about my father is that my father is a beautiful Sfas Emes. And it says that basically, v'dibarta bam v'shinamtam levanecha, and you should teach your children. V'dibarta bam, and you should speak the Torah. You should speak the words of Torah. V'shivtecha b'veisecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech u'v'shachlecha b'knecha. I haven't been able to say these words because it's in the context of a eulogy. I'm allowed to. But v'shivtecha b'veisecha, and sitting in your home, v'lechtecha v'derech, and walking on your way, and you're lying down, getting up. The way my father spoke Torah was not in words; it was in action. It was l'maisa. Everything with my father was hamaisa ha'ikr. Everything with my father was this way. He would talk his cheek to my father. He wanted to see it. He wanted to hear it. He wanted to live it. And so often, like my brother Arthur said, the main way my father would teach us was just by actually living what he learned. And so my father, like my mom said to Reb Pinson on the phone last Sunday, that she said, you know how it says about the Beis HaMikdash, she says, I feel the same way about my husband. My husband was a Beis HaMikdash. My husband was a Beis HaMikdash, and just like until my husband's back with us, just like until the Beis HaMikdash Ashlishi is built, I can't have full joy. My mom said, I don't see I could possibly have full joy without my husband, because he was my Beis HaMikdash. And I think that speaks volumes, the fact that my mother would say such a thing about her spouse. It really speaks to the Kedusha Sachayim. Not the Kiddush Hashem in one moment, some people make a Kiddush Hashem in 1 second and then they go on to the next world. My father, every living, breathing second of his life, he was in the posture of Kiddush Hashem. So much so that even in the hospital this past week, we heard countless times about how the doctors were astonished, the nurses were astonished at the amount of familial support. They said most of the people on the floor, one doctor even came in and he was smiling and he was like, wow, this is so beautiful. And we were all just schluffing on the floor, waking up. What was so beautiful? He said, I've never seen a family that actually cares about their beloved so much. Most people on this floor have one person, if any. And if they have no one, then maybe a pastor or something comes from some faraway church to say something to show 10 minutes of care. But he says, your family does not let your father be alone, because and he says that shows about who your father was. And one of the nurses, Rebecca, said something similar. My mom said to her, I want you to know that I wish you could have met my husband. He was such a special man. She says, you don't have to tell me. I could see it in action. I've never seen such a loving family in the SICU. Where you're only allowed 2 people at once. Usually it's more than enough. For you have 15, 20 people you're trying to get in and doing rounds. We'll squeeze 5 in. My father, Daddy, you were mamash chiddush in this way that you had this power of Yerushalayim. There's a power of Tzion, there's a power of Yerushalayim. Tzion, the Baal HaTanya once said that the difference between Tzion and Yerushalayim is Kimi Tzion Teitzei Torah. From Tzion, there's a tzaddik who's like a Tzion. And again, I said, Daddy, that you're a tzaddik. There's a tzaddik like a Tzion who has to speak volumes in order to be able to touch one person or just touch the heart. But then there's a tzaddik like Yerushalayim, Udavar Hashem, just one davar, just one little thing. And the way of my father was that just one little thing he would say would just go straight to the heart. Yasher Lalev, straight to the heart, and mamish would affect you, whether it was knowledge, whether it was just emunah pshuta, like my brother-in-law was saying, whatever it was, my father had this power of Yerushalayim, that just walking to Yerushalayim has a power. It's Karta de Shufraya, it's like a shofar city, that it's as if the shofar is blowing and awakening you to develop and self-actualize. So to my father had this thing about his Dalet Amos, that just being in his presence made you want to be a better person, without even having to say a word. And so, on the third point about the Beis HaMikdash, I really feel that my father was like the Kohen Gadol. Because it says in the Zohar, Madi Uzar Yurav, Madi Urav Uzar. One who makes himself great is actually the smallest person in the world. And one who makes himself small is actually the greatest person in the world. So I know my father was a Kohen, but Daddy, I really feel like you were the Kohen Gadol. You were really great in that way, because you took up no space. You always made the space filled with everyone else. You made space for everybody. And so I don't think it's by chance that a lot of us started to kiss my father's hand and his fingers and his limbs and his cheek and his forehead and his ears, because my father was kulo kodesh kadashim. Every single limb of my father, the whole fabric of his body, like the PSSner writes in Bnei Machshava Tova, that he dreams for Talmidim. My father never read the book, but he was Mekayim the whole entire book. He dreamt for his Chassidim to be able to to bring their entire, every fabric, every thread of their flesh into the confines of Kedusha. And I really feel like my father, in the most hidden way, it just looked like he was a regular community member. My father was progressively, over the course of his life, dedicating more and more, every single limb, the way he was eating, right? He wanted the Torah to actually go into his limbs. Every little dimension of my father was in a world of Kedusha, and I couldn't help but kiss his limbs because I said, this is Kodesh Kadash. And I want to end that I think there is a resolution here, is that our father, I don't know whether there exists a Yerusha Begashmias, but I do know that there exists a spiritual Yerusha, like the Maggid of Chernobyl. The Maggid of Chernobyl had no money in his hands, but the one thing he did have was he had a lot of midos that his children took. And I really think that my father's spiritual Yerusha is one he'd even be willing to share with the community and with any of your friends who you can talk to about this. And I think my father had an otsar, not of Sfarim, which he did, by the way. A house is filled with books. And not an otsar of children, but an otsar, which he did as well, but an otsar of midos tovos. And I think that it was something noticed by the doctors and nurses over the course of his entire life and his entire medical practice. His nurses missed him a month for the final month when he was working where he was working. And the nurses would call every few days and say, we missed Dr. Gaisin, we missed Dr. Gaisin. Like, what nurses actually care about the doctors they're working for? But my father had that koach. And so I think my father has a spiritual Yerusha. He blessed us with heirloom seeds of midos tovos, untainted from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, like his Birkas Abanim, and like his Birkas Abanos from Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. He really, really blessed us with their midos. And I could really count my father as one of the avos. I really feel like my mother's an ima, and one of the imos. And so I think you've heard all these, so many of the midos tovos, but just some of them are just my father's dignity. Even till the very last moment, you would see how my father's face, he looked like the most beautiful person in the world, even when he was in comatose, even when he wasn't able to speak with us. He carried his dignity. I remember the third or fourth to last Shabbos, I was zocher to spend with my father in this world together, Begashmias, at this point in time, because once again there will be Tchias Amesim and Imam. I remember that my father, he had a makom kavua at the end of the table. It was too far. It was too far for him to go on the walk. His limbs were just like jelly. He couldn't make it over. But we switched to seat with my mother's seat because it was about 15 feet closer, and it was a lot for my father. But even so, by night we were able to get my father to come and make Kiddush. And it was so beautiful to hear my father make Kiddush. He had such a muna pshuta when he said the words. He was really saying that bracha. Mine was nowhere else other than the bracha. But then by day, it was very hard for my father. Any morsel of food he would eat towards the end of his life would literally be in pain. It would go through the digestive tract in pain. Any drink, any sip would be in pain. And so it was very hard for my father. But my mom thought, maybe I'll get him a crisp white shirt, and maybe that would help. And my father had no koch, but when he saw the crisp white shirt that my mom brought down for him, he valued dignity so much that even just knowing that he could be dignified even in this horrible, difficult moment, that gave him the koch to actually get to the table and make Kiddush. And he forgot it at first. He forgot the Kiddush, but he pulled through and he remembered the words. And I just think that that's just like an heirloom of my father's dignity. That's my father's derech. He always wore a button-down shirt, sweatpants he didn't even know. That wasn't a word in his dictionary until the past couple of weeks when his skin couldn't handle other materials. And I wanted to tell the story of Reb Shmuel Delioza, one of the students at Arizal. That one day Reb Shmuel Delioza came in and Arizal stood up for him, even though he was the student. And the students didn't understand what was going on. And Reb Shmuel Delioza, I don't know if he knew exactly what was going on, but the Arizal said, Rabbi Shmuel Delioza had an Ibra Neshama, he had an impregnation of soul from Rav Pinchas ben Yair, the Tana Aleiki, who is known to do Pidyon Shvuyim. He dedicated his life towards Pidyon Shvuyim, and he dedicated his life towards helping the Aniyim. And he said, Shmuel Delioza, even though he's just a regular Talmud, today he's not. Today he also is impregnated with the soul of Pinchas ben Yair, because he took the clothing off his back and gave it to a poor person. And so we see from there, says the Alta Tasher Rebbe, that someone even many years after they've lived, even 1,000 years after they've lived, can return into this world through carrying on the heirloom of their legacy, through carrying on their type of speech, their type of thought, and their type of action. And I want to encourage us as a family to not consider this the end. This is really just the beginning. And we're going to plant, Daddy, we're going to take your heirloom seeds, and we're going to plant gardens, and we're going to plant orchards. We're going to make sure that you can delight in your own garden of your own peiros and maisim tovim. Because we know that the peiros of a tzaddik is a maisim tovim. And Daddy, you gave us so many maisim tovim to learn from. And my prayer, my tefillah, to turn my father's life into a tefillah, is that whenever you think about my father, there's more than enough to grow with. There's more than enough to take and plant into your life. Please take those seeds and please plant them inside of you and inside of your children and inside of your children's children and your children's children. And Daddy, I promise you, when they have the chance to have children, when Jeremy has a chance, and when our children have children, we are going to give them every last seed that we can remember that you gave us. And we're going to be able to delight in Gan Eden together in this world, the Gan Eden that you've given us, the fruit vegetation that you've given us, and in the next world. And I don't think it's by chance that my father, I thought he would pass away. It was Shabbos. I thought if he was going to pass away on Shabbos, like the doctor said, I thought maybe he'd pass away like by David HaMelech's man, by Moshe Rabbeinu Shalosh Shidduchos. And then the clock ticked 9:17, and it was Motzei Shabbos. And then I thought, Eliyahu Navi, my father's namesake, Kiva Moed, now is the time. Now is the time for my father, because now he can be like his namesake. Someone who's makdish his guf, and makdish his guf, and mivatal it to his neshama. That was the derech of my father, just like Eliyahu Navi. He went up whole, shalem to Shemayim. So too my father went up whole. And I think that the posture of my father in his dying day, dying in this world, but being reborn for the next world. He was just born into the next world. Is that my father, Al Pi Kabbalah, there's something called Rachel and Leah, and Rachel reaches up into the chazeh, the chest. That Rachel is this revealed world, and then Leah is this hidden world, Alma Deis Kasya. And I feel like my father's major posture over the course of his life was really, as much as it looked like towards, as he became a father, that he was a revealed person doing things, all of this, I think that his most deepest private space was really inward. And I don't think it's by chance that the first things that kind of lost circulation were his extremities, because my father's core was right here. He was always thinking about his family, about his friends, and his heart. And these were the strongest parts of my father till the very last second. I think that's who my father was. He had an incredible mind, he had an incredible heart, and that was the Ikar Shebekarim. And so again, as we prepare to go to the Garden of Paradise, I want you, Daddy, to know that we're going to continue your Garden of Amunah, your favorite last book, and we're going to continue planting all of those seeds.
Rabbi Bram Weinberg.
So many beautiful things have been said here today about a very special man. I just wanted to end the Hespedim by leaving you with an image that comes from this coming week's Parsha that we'll read on Shabbos. It's an image that I think captures everything that I saw in the hospital over the last couple of weeks. Hashem tells Moshe that at some time in the near future, he'll have to go up to Har HaAvarim, from which he will be able to see the land of Israel before he dies. On the one hand, Moshe's vision of the land that he would never enter is the tragic confirmation that so much good would happen to the Jewish people once he was gone. A whole future awaited them that he would never be zocheh to see. Yet on the other hand, the vision was meant as a nechama of sorts, as a gift from Hashem. The Rachamim says that Ure'es ha'aretz meant that from the mountain Moshe would see the reality before him, but the seemingly redundant mention of V'ra'isa osa, you shall see it, meant that Moshe would also be afforded another level of vision, a special, miraculous, prophetic glimpse long into the future. Moshe, before leaving the world, would have a twofold vision. Firstly, he would have a glimpse of all that he had accomplished, of the nation he helped build, the journey he had taken them on, of the Torah he had taught them. And secondly, he would also have a glimpse of all the future good that would come out of that which he started, that which he built in his lifetime, a ripple effect of his actions unimaginable to the human mind. As I watched the family gather by Dr. Gaisin's side in these last weeks, I could not help but think of this image of Moshe and its message. On the one hand, Dr. Gaisin's vision of the family around him was the tragic confirmation that there would still be, Emirtza Hashem, so much good to come from this family story that he would never get to see. It was the confirmation that Dr. Gaisin was being taken much too soon. But on the other hand, the vision was a gift. Dr. Gaisin was zocheh to see the reality before him, his amazing, wonderful accomplishments in this world, the care and comfort in life he provided so many through his career, superb relationship with Sheila over 49 years, the incredible family that he raised, and so much more, the astonishing fruits of his labor. And I couldn't help but think, I couldn't help but believe that, like with Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem must have given Dr. Gaisin a whole other level of miraculous vision as a tremendous gift for all the good that he did in this world as his neshama ascended. In addition to the beautiful reality before him, Hashem must have also given him a small glimpse of the future, of all what would be, would exist, would continue to be built after he was gone. I can't help but believe that that image must have served and continue to serve as a comfort to his neshama as it leaves this world. The Gaisin family, collectively and Sheila in specific, it's your sacred task to bring that image to fruition, to fulfill his legacy in that way. And by doing so, ensure that his neshama should continue to have nachas, continue to have nechama, and continue to have a stronghold here in this world. Tehei nishmasot tzura b'tzor ha'chayim.
Please rise for the Keil Maleh. Maleh Rachamim, Shochein B'Meromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanfei Ashchina, B'Malos Kedoshim Utorim, Gizora Ki Amazirim Es Nishmas, Eilihu Ben Mנחם Mendel הכהן, Sheolach Liolamo, Bavur Shanachim Spalalim, Yaras Karas Nishmaso, Began Eden, Tehei Menuchaso, Lochem Maleh Rachamim Yasti Rehu, B'Seiser Knafav Liolamim, V'yitzror b'tzor ha'chayim es nishmaso, Adonai unachlaso, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen.